opening speeches today, I think, set a great tone for what is ahead. We know the issue. La pollution plastique est partout aujourd'hui. La quantité écrasante et la mauvaise gestion des déchets.
Plastic pollution is everywhere today. The crushing quantity and the bad management of waste is something that we are collectively faced with. The reality is that these plastic trash will triple from now to 2060. 60 million tons could penetrate the oceans from now to 2040. We have no time to lose.
For products that do not biodegrade in our environment, that carry harmful chemicals, and are shown now by science to infiltrate our bodies. We're leaving a legacy of environmental disaster for future generations if we fail to act. And who does ultimately pay the cost? Our communities, and often the most vulnerable in our society. The wildlife and ecosystems on which we depend, who are choking on the waste. Our children and grandchildren, who will inherit the trillions of dollars worth of costs and a mess we're simply asking them to clean up. But I come to this conference with great hope. There is incredible momentum for people around the world for action, and Canadians are no exception. We all look for a time where our parks, beaches, oceans, and waterways are pristine, free from the steady degradations brought on by the buildup of plastic waste, where new and innovative businesses are flourishing with plastic-free alternatives, and where plastic producers are more accountable for their waste and the amount of recycled content in their products. This is within reach. Notre tâche est d'accélérer la rédaction de cet important accord.
Our task is to accelerate the signature of this important agreement. From now to the weekend, we should agree on 70% of the treaty. And then when we go to South Korea later this year, we will be able to conclude this agreement and initiate true change at the global level. I remember what we achieved during COP15 here in Canada. At the beginning of the conference, it was not sure that we would have an agreement. But in the end, we were capable of agreeing on a text that many consider to be historic in terms of protection of biodiversity.
For this to be a lasting solution, governments, Indigenous people, civil society, industry, finance sector, academia, and youth. That's why we're convening partnerships days with WWF, to make sure all voices are heard ahead of negotiations set to begin tomorrow. Today's Earth Day, which is this year's theme, Planet versus Plastic, calling on us for an ambitious change by 2040. Canada's working hard to walk the walk on plastic waste reduction. We helped to launch the Ocean Plastic Charter during Canada's 2018 G7 presidency. We introduced a domestic ban on harmful single-use plastics. We're implementing a comprehensive plan to reduce plastic waste and pollution. And today, I'm excited to announce a new federal plastic registry, which will increase transparency and help make producers responsible. Le Canada souhaite jouer un rôle de premier plan pour que l'on élimine les déchets plastiques.
Canada wishes to play a role in the forefront to eliminate plastics. An international treaty will put everybody on the same footing and contribute also to build the conditions of a truly sustainable economy to protect the environment and our health. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Guilbeault.
We have been taking you to Ottawa, where we've been listening in on some of the comments by Stephen Guilbeault, this country's Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Now, the reason why we're going there is because not only is this Earth Day, but our country, along with 176 other countries, are participating in a summit in Ottawa to try and get down to creating this historic treaty on reducing our dependence on plastic. So that's what we were discussing. We were hearing from the minister. He's saying he wants to accelerate this program. 70% of the treaty could be concluded by the end of this week. And then later in the year, they'll be meeting again in South Korea, where it should be signed off on. He said they have an ambitious goal for ambitious change up to 2040. Basically, the theme of this year is Planet over Plastics, and they want to reduce the production of, dependence on plastics, especially when they end up in landfills. So For that reason, let's turn now to our guest, because in 2022, the federal government also rolled out a ban on single-use plastics. That included checkout bags, but that ban has come with some consequences. The pileup of reusable bags living rent-free in our homes. Some grocery stores have tried to come up with solutions, but experts warn it doesn't go far enough. Myra Hird is the environmental studies professor at Queen's University. Professor Hird, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Natasha.
Okay, Professor Hird, that was like a mouthful out of me, and we want to talk to you about the grocery bags in just a second. But I wonder if I could get your reaction, because you were listening in to what the minister had to say. I'm very curious about this new registry to make plastic producers responsible. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's a great initiative. I think it's been a long time in coming. We could focus on why we're in 2024, and this is now just happening now, where plastics have been a concern for decades now. But maybe it's best for us to look forward and think about the positives. And so, I think the big win of this registry is that it should lead to greater transparency. And what I mean by that is Canadians will finally get to see, hopefully through this registry, how we start with fossil fuels, the fossil fuels produce the plastics, and then how plastics are manufactured, who is manufacturing them, how this translates into retail, and then finally how it translates into all the plastics waste that we as consumers, as Canadians, deal with when we consume products. So I think it's going to be, it stands to have a powerful impact on helping us all to really see from the beginning to the end of the plastics life cycle. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity for us to make change.
The way you just outlined that, Professor Hird, it really illustrates the environmental impact of the production of plastics. Are plastics much more detrimental in their production than other goods that are produced by companies?
Yeah, so plastics, when we say plastics, we're really talking about fossil fuels. So if we can think about all of the environmental impacts of resource extraction and manufacturing fossil fuels, we're looking at the very same and similar kinds of things with producing plastics, because 99.9% of plastics are derived from fossil fuels. So when we're looking at environment and human health impacts, we have to be thinking about fossil fuels. And I think the fact that plastics are derived from fossil fuels is not something that we're used to really thinking about. So I think that once we see that we begin with fossil fuels that produce plastics, and in that all that manufacturing, way before we get to for when we're buying plastics goods and packaging, which is mostly made out of plastics, I think we get a much truer sense of the reality, which is that most of the environmental impact happens before we even consume the product or the packaging.
Okay, that is fascinating. So in that case, let's awkwardly transition to this issue then of the grocery bags, because our country had decided, okay, the bags are going into the landfills, they never break down, they're hurting the birds, it's bad. So everybody gets a reusable bag instead. But now we got too many of those. So, but as you mentioned, that's at the stage where it's already at the consumer. So how do we fix this problem?
Well, first of all, I think we're aware of this problem because most consumers in Canada, they have a bunch of these reusable bags either in their car, the boot of their car, or strapped to their bicycle, or they're carrying them around, in their backpack in case they stop at the grocery store on the way home from work, or whatever it is. So we're sort of drowning in the sea of these reusable plastic bags. We have too many of them, and then of course if we forget them, then when we're at the store, we have to buy. Grocery stores, etc., charge us for yet another reusable bag. But let's bear in mind that these plastic bags are really a very minor part of the plastic's overall environmental and human health problem. They really constitute a very small amount. We think that it's a huge problem because because we have these bags in our presence. They're in our homes, they're in our cars, etc. But really, when we're looking at plastics, it's a very tiny fraction. And in fact, all of the single-use plastics that Canada is trying to ban, and let's remember that companies are pushing back against this ban, and so we'll see what happens in court. But they really altogether really represent around 3% of the plastics that are actually being produced. So it seems like a very big problem, and I'm not trying to diminish our experience of these reusable bags, but it's a small problem compared to a much larger plastics problem.
I completely hear you on that front. I think for so many people, and the reason why we're doing this interview is because, as you said, this is the thing in our face. Our 20 bags stuffed into the closet when you only needed a couple. And they just keep piling up, and you keep forgetting them at home, and you keep buying more. And then people get groceries ordered online, and when they come, they're in those plastic bags. So some grocery stores, Walmart, for example, is trying to initiate programs at the consumer level. If it's a consumer level problem, then they're trying to help consumers, and they're saying, hey, we'll buy back, or we'll reuse them for you. By your analysis, then, does that mean this is meaningless?
It's not meaningless. Okay. I think that one of the key things here is that I think Canadians are increasingly understanding that we have really taken on the burden of plastics waste and responsibility for both plastics waste, for disposal, and for recycling in terms of sorting and everything, and that a significant amount of our taxes are going to this. And every time we go to a grocery store and they charge us for yet another bag, again, that is pushing the responsibility and the financial burden onto consumers. So I think that the more that grocery stores, especially these very big, large chains that are making astronomical profits, I think the more they shoulder the financial responsibility and the legal responsibility for dealing with all of these plastics, the better. So I see grocery stores, Walmart, et cetera, taking that responsibility. Buying back, I think is a really good. It's like the beer store, taking back the bottles. I think that this is positive insofar as these large grocers, these large stores have to take responsibility. I think these large companies and corporations have really gotten away with an awful lot for decades now. And it's time that they take far more responsibility for all of this packaging, et cetera, that they have really foisted onto consumers.
Professor Myra Hird, so much more I want to ask you, but we have to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.